Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first session of day 4 of the Swim Ontario virtual AGM and conference. My name is Stu McLean. I'm Provincial and Regional Programs Coordinator for Swim Ontario. I want to welcome you all to our Grassroots discussion today. Before we get started, I just want to remind everybody that we have the ability to provide PD points for these sessions. So make sure when you see the reminder come up to pump in your email address or your NCCP number so that you get your PD points for these sessions. I want to just start with a quick intro to the entire program. We started the Grassroots presentation piece back in the spring of 2021. The idea here is to create a bit of a discussion / dialogue around grassroots swimming in Ontario as we reopen the world of swimming. Our first session was just a general information session, but today we have two wonderful guests who play a key role in grassroots swimming and swimming as a whole here in the province of Ontario and across Canada. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but for just general politeness, I will say welcome to Heather Bruce from NIAC Swimming and Cathy Pardy, who's the head coach at Region Waterloo Swim Club and Wilfrid Laurier University. So welcome, ladies. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
I wanted to say it looks like we've got 52 people online with us today. That's pretty exciting. So I wanted to start with just a bit of a background on you both. So maybe Heather, if you wanted to start, maybe just tell us a bit about yourself,
Sure.
and your pathway to the role that you're in now.
Sure. So I come from a not-for-profit background. I started in the childcare industry years and years ago, running and managing childcare centers for high-need families. I eventually taught newcomers to Canada how to be successful in the Canadian workplace. So in particular childcare centers. So I would teach the basics of child development, cognitive, physical, social, and emotional development, the importance of having fun and the skills learned from having fun, positive behavior management. But then I would also teach how to write a resume, how to have an effective interview, time management, organization, first impressions, and communication, verbal and written, and confidence building, and how to trust the process and not the product. Because even in children, not in swimming, but in childcare, there is a process of learning. I stayed at home with my children for 10 years, and I got into master swimming as a hobby, just to get out of the house. And one day I decided to take the 101, swim 101, just for fun, just to learn more about swimming. And by the end of the weekend, I was hired by NIAC. So again, as a hobby, I started as an assistant coach, and just for some pocket money and some experience getting out on the deck. And I eventually wound up in something called the Waves Coordinator job. And that's where my love of grassroots swimming started. So Waves at NIAC is sort of a bread and butter. It's a pre-competitive program. We started off at about 150 swimmers and grew into over 300 over the years. And I was really fortunate early on in NIAC because Murray, Judge, and Olga Massel really recognized the importance of my role as a Waves coordinator, and believed in the grassroots programming early on and always supported me in that role of being, I wasn't actually a coach anymore, I was actually visiting programs and mentoring the young coaches on deck. And all the skills that I spoke about with teaching newcomers to Canada, I applied to the new coach in swimming. It's all the same things. I would train them right from the moment they filled out an application to the interview, to the resume, And then first impressions, confidence building, time management, getting a program ready before they get on the deck, not making it up as they go along. And then really doing the on-deck mentorship in the waves coordinator job. Eventually, it evolved into director of coaching. So my little hobby job turned into a full-blown career. And now I am one of the directors of NIAC. So it's a new job, and I know it's not one that's necessarily recognized in the swimming world. So we have a director of coaching, which is me, and a director of performance, which is Eddie. So I look at the coaches on deck, and Eddie looks at the swimmers in the water. And I think all the time about coaching. I think about the art of coaching. I think about how they're delivering their programming. I'm their advocate. So, and Eddie thinks about the performance. So I actually never really think about the performance of the swimmers unless a group is falling apart and they need help with managing swimmer behavior or parent issues. I'll deal with that. Eddie's worried about the effectiveness of the program and if it's working and if the swimmers are performing. So I don't have an illustrious career in coaching. I've never coached a high performance swimmer. I actually my passion is in the grassroots swimming, but also in the art of coaching. So I do work with the competitive coaches, the higher ups, but also the new coaches. I visit on Sundays with all the competitive coaches at TPASC. I make my rounds. I talk to each one of them for about 20 minutes to review the week and the week ahead. And one of the coaches out of the blue yesterday said to me, "Heather, you're like," and I'm like, "Pillar?" And he said, "No." And he's like, "No." And I'm like, "A building?" And he said, "No." And I'm like, "What am I like?" He said, "You're like a bird." And he said, you spread your wings and all the coaches are under your wings. And you protect us and you make us feel safe. You have clear boundaries, but you also want us to learn. And you're always trying to teach us, always trying to give lessons, set goals for us, so we can leave the nest but come back to know where we're safe and that you can take care of us and advocate for us." So I thought that was nice. That came out of the blue yesterday. So that's me in a nutshell, my background and where I'm at today.
How great is that, eh?
Wow. I have to say I'm very thankful to NIAC and to the board of directors for recognizing that. It's a wonderful job. It's a new job. It's very different. And there's advantages and disadvantages to it for sure. But that's like for any job. But I'm very fortunate.
Yeah, that would make your Sunday and your week and your month.
Love it. Yeah.
Cathy, how about you? Do you want to give us a bit about your background?
Wow, I want Heather's title. That sounds like so much fun.
It is so much fun.
So a bit about me is I used to swim like so many coaches before me. Like we used to swim and then we kind of get addicted to the chlorine and find ways to stay within that environment. So I used to swim for what was at the time TOMAC, Town of Mississauga Aquatic Club, which is now MISAC, under Bill Barton, who is still coaching, and he's 80 years old and he lives in Texas. So that's fun, and I'm still in touch with him because that's where I really kind of found the love of wanting to go through on the coaching path, because it's about mentoring not only coaches, but mentoring young people to maybe see that this is a viable option for a career path, and having like just kind of that connection to people for life. So after swimming, Bart asked me if I wanted to volunteer coach and do some stuff for him on deck. And I said, sure, why not? And then it just went from there. At one point I thought, okay, I should take a swimming 101 course. So I took swimming 101 before I was 20. And then I left coaching thinking, oh, I'm supposed to go to that 9-to-5 job. That's the progression of where you're supposed to be. Grassroots coaching, yeah, it's good, but you know, it doesn't pay the bills and so on. So let me go to the 9-to-5. I was in the 9-to-5 job for a few years and thought, I hate this. What am I doing? And I decided, okay, I'll reconnect with Bart and I'll see if I can't redo some things. Then I ended up I got married, I had children, I thought, let me get back into coaching. I retook my swimming 101 because it had been so many years that had passed between the two. I thought things have updated. I need to kind of be current. So I redid my swimming 101. I volunteered my first year of coaching with the Guelph Marlins. And after that first year, they had a coach position open up. They asked me if I wanted to go into that. Because I had proven myself over that whole first year of volunteering. And I got to coach beside Ann Ottenbright, which I absolutely loved and established a great working relationship there. And then after Guelph, I went to Region of Waterloo Swim Club. I worked under Dean Bowles, and he's now with Swim Ontario. It's kind of funny how we're all still connected. When I left Waterloo, I ended up going into Oakville, and I was there for quite a few years. And I worked under Sean Baker, and I got to know Laura Nichols at Waterloo when I was there, and we worked together, and I mentored her through coaching. Then she went to Oakville. I seemed to follow her to Oakville, and we worked together again there and established a really good building of young swimmers and talented age groupers to move forward. And at that time, I was like, oh, my perfect position is just to be an assistant coach in that role. Let me partner up with a head coach, hand my swimmers off to them. And lo and behold, I then become head coach of Waterloo, Region of Waterloo and Wilfrid Laurier University. Through the years, I became a director on the Canadian Swim Coaches Association, and I've been on there for 7 years now, I think. I'm the director of operations, and I love having input on that. That's also a volunteer position and a few hours throughout my week and months and years. I've become a learning facilitator, and that's been quite enjoyable to once again mentor young coaches at the early stages. And I say young coaches, not as in age, but as in career age, because there's a difference between the two. And then last year, of course, I was named as the head coach for Canada Summer Games, which is postponed to summer 2022. So that's kind of exciting. And I've completed my 201, I've completed my 301, and the learning just keeps on going. It's on and on and on, and it's quite an enjoyable ride for the moment. That's me.
That's great. I think I've had the pleasure of working with Cathy on our youth ID programming as well, and it's been great sort of working with these 200 plus swimmers that sort of monthly and engaging them, and it's really been quite enjoyable to be part of it. So I appreciate that. So one of the things that we are going to try to do as we move through this presentation is we want to try and make sure that you're all awake and engaged in what we're trying to talk about. And one of the things we're going to transition to now is maybe in and around the importance of grassroots swimming to each of you. And in the chat, if members of our viewing audience here want to just put a little blurb in the chat around the importance of grassroots swimming to them and to their program, right? To kind of give us a sense of what others are thinking out there in the province. So I don't know, where do we want to go first, Heather or Cathy? Do you want to talk about sort of why do we need grassroots swimming, right? And by extension, grassroots coaching, especially now coming out of COVID and this extended COVID time frame. Let's sort of dive into that a little bit.
Do you want to start, Cathy?
Sure, I'll go. So to me, there is no high performance swimming without grassroots swimming. It's just not going to happen. And grassroots is absolute key in teaching skills correctly, setting the foundation for athletes to learn time management, to learn how to do a skill, to learn how to be committed, to learn how to set goals. And those are all things that you're doing throughout all of the stages in swimming. And without that, there's no high performance at all. And, for myself, I started in grassroots swimming, and then it's just taken me to where I am now. So there's coaches that I know want to stay in grassroots, and that is fantastic. There's head coaches that will be head coaching senior athletes, but they'll also come down into grassroots coaching. One, it is probably the most fun area to coach, and it's the most energetic area to coach. And it's something where you hear all the time coaches that are getting ready to retire say, yeah, I just want to go down and coach grassroots swimming, because it brings so much joy in the whole process. And really and truly, without it, there are no medals at the Olympics. It's such a key, valuable role, all within swimming and building that foundation. Heather.
I agree with that. So we have, as I said, a large pre-competitive program, and we can have on a good year at least 20 waves programs and 6 or 7 intro programs. And even I do consider grassroots even 15 and overs that aren't necessarily competitive. And I'm out there in the weeds of the grass, seeing the effects of what those programs do for a community. So it's definitely built, and especially after being home for so long, it's creating a community that wasn't there before. And I have the benefit now that I've been around in NIAC for so long. I've seen those friendships form from the waves level, from swimmers and the parents. Those carpools happen, and those are important. It's an important part of community. And I find also with grassroots, like you say, Cathy, they're learning, and it's more of a learning environment sometimes than an actual competitive environment. They're actually learning how to manage themselves in a group, and so are the coaches. The coaches are learning to manage themselves as part of a team. It's teamwork for the first time ever. They have I partner coaches up on the pool deck, so they're having to learn coaching dynamics together for the first time ever. It's their first. Some of us, yes, young coaches. I was a young coach at 40 when I first entered into the swimming field. So, but it's new to coach with a partner. I also think grassroots is important for inclusiveness. We've had athletes that are hearing impaired, visually impaired, all kinds of learning disabilities. We try and tailor the programs to those swimmers. So if I see a swimmer not managing well at 7 o'clock at night in a brightly lit pool, I'll move them to a pool that's smaller, maybe earlier in the night. So I find it is inclusive, and I think that's really important. I'm just checking my notes here. Everything that you said, managing behavior, learning to focus in a group, is all important at the grassroots level for sure. And it is a feeder into the club. And that was one thing that Murray always said, was it's the base. Without waves and the younger groups, we have no club. Like it's the base. So
yeah. And you know what? It really promotes a healthy lifestyle at a young age. And in this day and age where everything is online and everything is, you're in school online. I mean, thankfully they're back in school, but some parents have opted out of in-person schooling and they remain online. And so learning's online, and it gives them an opportunity to have an activity that's outside of the computer screen, to be active and release that built up, pent up energy that they may have. And as you start growing and get attached to that physical activity, it releases happy endorphins.
Yeah.
So to get off your butt and away from the screen, whether it's video games or learning screen, it gives you an outlet to become active and healthy in life. And it sets the tone for where you want to be even further down the road and later in life. So.
Sure. And going back to that learning piece, as opposed to competitive, we end our Waves program with a splash and dash, and it's huge. And we try not to promote it as a competitive event. It's showcasing everything they've learned, and you see at the end of a 15-week program the connections that have been made and the pride and the skills they've learned, not only for the swimmers but for the coaches. I look at the coaches again. I automatically look at the coaches and see that pride in them for how far they've come in the program. So it's always a nice way to end.
I think that's I want to pull back to one of the things that Laura McPhee said yesterday, and in terms of the sort of entrance into the experience for a lot of these younger swimmers. And I think that what we're seeing now is even our younger swimmers who were returning, who were there pre-pandemic, really are essentially new swimmers again. And I think that there's a value or an importance to treat them that way. And so I want to get some perspective on that entrance plan, maybe from you, Heather, in terms of some of the messaging you provide to your coaches as they welcome these new kids on pool deck.
So I really thought about that a lot this summer when I coached a few groups, and that was their first exposure back to the water. One of the first things I really focused on was ensuring they all learned each other's names more than ever, because they have had no connection. They had no face-to-face for so long. And that little group grew so strong, and they've all wanted to come back together and again in the fall. So it's more, I think what I want from the coaches more is that connection part. And then with the new swimmers, I can't remember, way back, probably pre-pandemic, I can't remember. I watched a webinar on, I think it was Grassroots swimming, and going way back to the basics, like floating, like remembering the feeling being on the water, because they haven't even had that feeling. So I'm pulling the coaches way back to the basics in terms of re-entering into the programs. And as for the coaches and their re-entry, I did a training a few weeks ago on how to write a letter to the parents, what should be included in the letter this time around as opposed to a year or two ago, and how to do an effective parent meeting so that they could connect with the swimmers on Zoom and parents ahead of time. So in that sense, that kind of re-entry, is that what you're trying to get at? Or?
Yeah, I think so. I think that I think that there is an element of kid gloves, because I think we are, in a lot of ways, as society, we're relearning how to interact with each other.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
and a lot of the families that are coming back to our programming are coming back in with some hesitation and trepidation and you know, wanting to make sure everything's safe, and I think that it's important, and maybe Cathy, you can speak to this, but talking a bit about setting a tone for those athletes as they come back into the pool and the value and the importance of that.
Yeah, and I know that when we were, like, last year was just a crazy time for everybody, and most of the programs that got eliminated in most clubs was the grassroots programming. And we, as coaches and my full-time staff, we sat down and took a real look at it, saying, how are we going to reintroduce grassroots? Because really and truly, we've lost a whole age group of athletes. And how do we bridge the gap to not have a big hole in development going down the road? And which Olympics is that going to affect? So we really took it from this angle of we've lost this, but yet we have to be able to make sure we bridge that hole in order to develop ahead of schedule with the ones that are coming back in. And it became we better be on point when it comes to teaching skills, and don't let things slide. Make sure you're very committed to teaching the skill-based sets. I mean, we're talking drop-down push-offs. I witnessed a practice. I attended one of my grassroots practices last week, and I watched the coaches on deck with the groups, and one of them was they just taught drop-down push-offs for the whole entire hour, because that's a key stepping stone to pushing off correctly to go into that streamline. Oh, so now this week they'll probably be going into streamlines, right? So it's about building the complete basic and then add on, add on, add on. If we add on kind of with, I want to say, excitement of doing something right. Yay, you did that really well. Can we fine tune it even further? Let's be kind, let's be patient, because there's a lot of frustrations there, and kids just want to go, and they don't necessarily want to hold up and learn all the skills correctly. So we as coaches need to really refine, and do it correctly all in the early stages of this season. And by Christmas, by the end of November, they will be moving a lot further and going further in practice and doing a little bit more in practice. But it's really about how can we in the grassroots section kind of capitalize on a start over. So we have a do-over right now. And we can really have huge success with our younger generation in learning. And our younger generation, again, it's in swimming years, not in actual years, because there are kids who watch the Olympics who went, wow, I want to do that. A grassroots swimmer can be a 14-year-old boy. And that's good, right? Let's teach him correctly. The beauty of teaching grassroots swimming to an older age group is they tend to pick it up and learn at a much faster rate than our younger ones if they're kind of on the same footing of skill. And you can use terminology a little bit more advanced for them. But the younger kids, great, we're getting them back in. And I've promoted to all the parents who have come back into our grassroots program, swimming is the absolute safest sport out of all the sports available to you. So glad to have you back. So glad to welcome you. And it's been a really good startup week last week, because everybody is going, let's capitalize on what we've been given and let's advance ourselves further quicker by having a better foundation.
Yeah, that goes back to process versus product, right? It's
Right.
taking the time. It's funny, I had the exact experience last week. I coached an 11-12 group. They forgot how to take turns. I set them up on either end of the pool, so there's no congregating at the walls. And then I thought, oh, they can do a 50. They've forgotten how to take turns. They couldn't do it. So I did the exact same thing. I did widths. I lined them up along the entire side of the pool, and I thought, just take your time. You have they have to remember how to hold on to the wall properly and drop down, push off. I did the exact same thing. It is a process. It takes time.
There we go. Sorry about that. I'm going to move into sort of the investing in young coaches, but just to jump in off of that, some of that discussion there, in that we are in a bit of a reset mode with a lot of these young kids. And I'm wondering if it's one of those things where you see some value in programs taking the initiative to maybe try new things, to try different ways of engaging swimmers. I read, how you listen to a million podcasts and read a million articles and books and whatever through this last 18 months. And somewhere along the way, it was one of the things that really jumped out at me was that if we just try to repeat what we've done in the past, it's doomed to fail. You know, and I wonder if, just to get your perspective on that, in that the value of the reset and the willingness, or the difference that we can have, sort of changing the way people view the sport, engage in the sport, be active in the sport.
Do you want to look at it?
Go ahead, Heather.
Yes, that was my point earlier, where I thought I'm going to change the curriculum up a little bit. I'm going to go even further back to basics to floating, and as opposed to just starting off on the streamline. I think there definitely is that opportunity, and we're still right now, to be honest, still trying to figure out what pools we have and don't have for the fall. A lot of pools are broken. I'm still trying to figure out how to hire. So I'm still kind of there, as opposed to, and plus integrating the COVID needs around COVID. But I have reinvented the program in the sense that every young swimmer has a home base around the pool. So they're not where they put their equipment, and they don't go back to they're not all crowding around a pile of equipment at the beginning of the lane. So yes, in terms of reimagining, maybe even some community development, community connections. I was thinking about that for my 15 and overs grassroots program, where they might want to do more than just swim. They have a bit of extra time on their hands because they're not swimming as much as the higher levels. So for sure, I want to capitalize on the time that we have together. Now that we're back together again, it's kind of nice.
Yeah, and you know what, we had, so in our group structure and our club structure, we had groups for, 4 to 6 year olds. We had groups for kind of 6 to 8 year olds. We have groups for 9 to 10. And I had to readjust some of that because of the age of athletes and losing that year. My 9 to 10 year old group, you know what, let's put in some 11-year-olds, because no fault of their own, they missed out on that 10-year-old opportunity last year. So we've expanded some of our groups by age to have a little more overlap and a little bit more kind of sensitivity towards what somebody may have missed, and giving opportunity to those kids to be able to learn and thrive. So we've had to make some adjustments based on our club structure, but like Heather, we're building the base up again, because in most clubs, the majority of your swimmers in your organization are at the grassroots level. And they are the ones that will carry through the success of a club down the road. If you don't have a base, we all know that kids will choose other sports, or for whatever reason, they want to focus more on school, and they depart the sport between the ages of, 13, 16. And if you don't have the base, you're not going to have the numbers at the top. You don't have the numbers at the top, we're not developing high performance. So really and truly, we focused in last year during COVID and shutdowns and what have you, is we tried to maintain as many programs at the bottom end as possible. And it meant my national guys, they weren't racing, so they swam 4 times a week. So I could give up pool time to make sure we're developing our grassroots, because that one is absolute key to your survival.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. I think what it will do is we'll push into sort of the investing in young coaches. And I think one of the questions, and this is out to our audience, maybe have them fill in the chat here and maybe talk about some of the ways that you guys invest in your young coaches. Let's not put a dollar amount on it, but certainly some of the expectations that you have on yourselves as mentors in order to invest in these young coaches. If you could just throw those in the chat, that'd be great. If not, that's okay too. Cathy, I'm going to come to you first on training, educating, and mentoring these coaches. And then Heather, I'll slide over to you on that. But I just want to get a sense of just the importance of those 3 things for young coaches.
Right. So in my position, we have 4 more full-time coaches below me. So I shouldn't say below me because I count us as a team, and it's about building a team environment. So if you can teach your younger coaches, and in my case, it's my 4 other full-time coaches, teach them in how to mentor and give what we want to see in development in our athletes to those coaches, then they are going to progress through. So my other full-time coaches, they also oversee junior programming, and they also oversee the grassroots coaches. And we get into coaches meetings where we will discuss, well, what's happening, what's going on, where are we at, how many kids are ready to progress and move forward, and so on. And I'm always bugging my coaches to either sign up for conferences, go and ask questions. A grassroots coach can absolutely say, hey, can I come on deck and be with you and learn from you? Absolutely. You know, I will even give you stuff to do throughout that process. And for me, it's about trusting and knowing that when I bring in my other 4 coaches, that they are then going to deliver what I'm delivering to them to their coaches that they're overseeing and working with. So when we work on coach education, it's about, these are the skills we want to see. This is what needs to be taught. This is the order in which it needs to be taught. This is where you progress. Because a lot of times we'll get some grassroots coaches who will come in and think, I'm going to just swim them up and down the black line and train them. But it's not training at that level. It's learning and making sure that they're slowing it down to do it correctly. And again, I'll have my other coaches supervise them and say, hey, what is it you're doing? What is it you want to get out of it? And what is, the reason behind doing what you're doing? What's it going to achieve? And my coaches and I will sometimes give a snippet of what we would like to see, and then we'll give a little bit of freedom for them to develop and create some skill set based behind it. And then, does it work? Does it not work? How do we readjust? So it's a constant monitor of, where are we going? What are we doing? What's the reason we're doing what we're doing? So, it's about furthering your education. As a learning facilitator, Stu, and I teach Swimming 101, it's about not ending your education at that point. Because just because you got your Swimming 101 or your 201 doesn't mean you're the expert in the field. It is still learning and progressing and moving forward. Sports science always comes into play. What's happening within your organization comes into play, and how you're going to achieve what you want to achieve comes into play. So keep learning in every stage that you're at. I am still learning. When I do a Swimming 101 and I have grassroots coaches come up with their ideas, and because we're online, they put them in the chat box, I go, I'm stealing that. That is phenomenal. So teaching your younger coaches not to be afraid to share, because sometimes they have brilliant ideas that you can run with. Sometimes they need a few more connector points to attach to it in order to expand on it. But it's an amazing thing when you have a full team of minds creating and evolving within your sport.
It's good. I steal everything. I go to all the webinars and learn and take things. It's the value of going to those webinars are amazing. I come from a totally different perspective because I counted on Friday 25 coaches right now at NIAC, and for about 36 programs. So we're a large club. And the investment and because of the role I'm in, the investment I make with these coaches is my time. I'm a connector. I spend a lot of time with every coach in the club, and I appreciate that I'm a connector, and I think it goes a long way. I think that difficult conversations are easier had with strong relationships. So I build those relationships with the coaches. And stealing from another webinar, I remember there was an assistant coach, a roundtable discussion, and someone in that discussion said, I want the coaches to feel a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, and a sense of value in the club. And it really got me thinking, okay, what do I do for my coaches at NIAC? And so under the purpose, I thought, okay, well, I have a curriculum. I've created a very thorough curriculum for the grassroots programs so that they know that there is a purpose. There's a reason why they're there. They're following a curriculum. They're creating an effective program where that's successful. It's been proven to be successful. So you're going to see throughout the process gains in the swimmers. I'm creating training that meets their needs. So my training, I can, again, because of my role, pre-pandemic, I would have done classroom training, and then we did a big on-deck training with Eddie in the skills session. So they would see the skills being carried out in the pool. It was beautiful. Of course, that's all gone. Can't have all the 25 coaches on a deck anymore, standing together. But I would have that kind of training. The on-deck mentorship creates a sense of purpose too, because I'm standing there helping them further themselves in their coaching right there on the spot. And then I always impart on the grassroots coaches that they're the swimmer's first coach. So they're the most important coach. And oftentimes, Eddie or Billy or some of the older coaches will say, who was your first coach? And they'll always remember the grassroots coach. It's their first coach. So that creates a sense of purpose. In terms of belonging, I think of connections, making those connections with each other. Like you say, people asking you to coach alongside you, Cathy. I would encourage any coach to go and meet with Eddie. Eddie's always open to having coaches come out on Saturdays to stand alongside him, and he gives out the jobs too. I did a coach bulletin. I started that during the pandemic, and I went back through old AGM minutes from the 70s and 80s, and I would scan the minutes and find little tidbits. So, for example, one was all the coaches had to bring the caretakers a turkey for Thanksgiving to say thank you. That was back in the 70s. And the purpose of that bulletin was to help them feel like they were part of something when there was nothing there. We were all shut down. There was nothing going on. Again, I stole from the CSCA. I love the email that they sent every week with different podcasts and articles and learning opportunities. I put that in my coach bulletin. I would take some links that I liked and put it in. Now I just research my own. If I see a need out there, I put in an article last week on the importance of patience. Is that a life skill? Because I think coaches want to create results really fast, going back to saying, we've got to go back to the basics now. So I did that bulletin, and I stopped in July because I needed a break from it, and Eddie and I were planning for the fall, and coaches came back and said, where did you guys go? Like, that was a huge, important, I didn't know it was that important. And I think that created a sense of belonging, and they said, you and Eddie disappeared. And it was that bulletin. They said it left a huge gaping hole when I stopped. So now I make sure I do it every week. And then finally, the worth. I feel evaluations create a sense of worth. I'm a big believer in them. So I took, I think it's the on-deck assessment from the 101, and I created a checklist for the grassroots coaching where, are they providing an inclusive environment? Are they, is it safe? Do they know the emergency? Have they created an emergency action plan? So again, and then plus their performance. Are they touching on all the learning styles for the swimmers? And then the higher level coaches, I do SMART goals. So it's a process where they can reflect and think about what kinds of goals they want to work towards. And it's always usually successful. I think people underestimate the evaluation and how far they go. And I do think that creates a sense of worth. They feel valued in the end. again, going back to that connection, they know where they stand in their performance as coaches. Because we talk all the time. I always end a text or an email with, call me if you need to talk it out. And so they do. They know they can even show up at my house. So for a beer or a hamburger, I have a coach that shows up every couple months for food. and connect over food. I go, it's important. So I'd say, again, I think it's my role, but I invest all my time into these coaches and try and get what they want, help them get to where they want through mentorship.
I just have to say, Heather, listening to you going, okay, 1, I need a Heather. 2, my club wouldn't have the budget to have a Heather. So how do I create a Heather within my organization? So because there's many clubs out there that don't have the means to have a you to do all of this for them. And I know the workload on a head coach right now is massive. But it means that you could really utilize some of your younger coaches, some of your grassroots coaches. You know what? Can you put together a little newsfeed that we can put together, like to send out to our coaching staff? Source out some swimming information and some interesting articles. Can you be responsible to send that out? And what a great learning opportunity for a grassroots coach in a smaller organization to start having more value and worth to move themselves forward in their own education and contributing to your team of coaches. So I'm now starting to think, okay, which coaches on my staff can I designate some of the things you're talking about, Heather, to actually enhance what we have. So thank you for that, because now you've got my ball rolling to utilize some of my grassroots coaches just a little bit more.
Well, and I'm happy to share that bulletin if anybody wants to see it, because I honestly, the CSCAs was one that inspired me, and actually doing SMART goals with the competitive coaches. They wanted to do a newsletter for their swimmer families, and I'm like, well, if they can do it, I can do it, and I should be doing it for the coaches. And it was at a time, I know we all went through it. What was it, the languishing time when we're all kind of just wondering what our purpose in life was during that blah time during the shutdown. And I thought, okay, I got to pick myself up and pick these coaches up again, and remember that NIAC is still here and we're moving forward, and how can we further ourselves during that time. But it took off. So I'm happy to share it with anybody who wants to see it.
Yeah, that's great. Because I mean, grassroots coaching, if you think about it, we have to truly work with them to say, you are valuable, you are worthy, you are accepted. Without you, we wouldn't be where we are. And sometimes we let those communications slide and we forget to show appreciation and gratitude for our grassroots coaches and what they do. And you know, I would hate for a grassroots coach to feel that, yeah, I'm disposable. Who am I? What have I got to offer? I'm young. I'm just teaching streamlines. And yet it's such a massive piece of the value of what we need to do to move forward.
For sure.
So it's just, you know, if there are coaches on this call who have grassroots coaches beneath them, or if there's show appreciation and value and gratitude for that. And if there are grassroots coaches on the call, I would really highly encourage you to say, hey, can I come to one of your practices of a coach above to learn a little more? Hey, I heard about the coach newsletter. Can I take that? Take the initiative. As a grassroots coach, don't be afraid to take the initiative to move yourself forward and to, create an environment that you want to be a part of as well.
So I think that leads me into my next kind of, because we've covered the sort of working with the Gen Z coach, if you will, and if once I don't know what the next is, we're going to Gen AA or whatever. But I think what some of the stuff that you're bringing out is the idea of how do we capture that next generation of coaches, because we are seeing Heather, you had identified it the other day, a challenge in having enough coaches. Even with 25 coaches, you're still looking for more. And it's not a matter of you're looking for a body, you're looking for a coach, right? Somebody's going to invest their time and value into their swimmers. And I is it as simple as making that individual feel important, placing a value on them, hearing them? Is it as simple? Is that how we capture that next generation?
I think yes, definitely creating that value. I'm still kind of trying to figure out how to get the current ones, and we've talked a bit about the barriers in our past conversations too, with the cost of these programs. And I think where I'm headed towards is, and I know I've reached out to some Ontario about this, is I'd like to create a coach academy within my club, and where I have a group of younger coaches, 14, 15 years old, so I'm getting them even younger than 16, 17, where we can get some funding and provide the NLS training, the 101 training, the coach training right earlier on, so that they're getting the bug earlier. Because I'm more dealing with right now, normally I am off the deck, but I don't have enough coaches. So I've got to, and I think, like Cathy said with the swimmers, this is going to take years and years. Something's going to happen for years and years. You're going to feel that lacking of the program. I'm feeling that in the coaching, and I think that could happen for years and years. I know City of Toronto is stuck; they don't have enough NLS qualified people to work. So I want to go younger. Referring to Gen Z, I'm trying to get to that generation, train them maybe slightly different, reimagining the training, communication. They're the generation that don't know what life is like without a smartphone, but they're also the generation, I don't think they read emails. So how do I communicate more effectively with them? So I'm trying to grab them in different ways, grab their imagination and inspire them in different ways. And I'm still kind of noodling and trying to figure it out. And if anybody has any ideas, I'd love to hear from people around that. But my goal is to go younger and get them so that I actually have a base for next year. Because I do have 25 coaches, but I need about 5 more. So, and I'm going to be the one that's coaching if I don't find 5 more coaches. So I'm lucky that I have some, but I need more. So I'm trying to think of next year and how to get them for next year. I also think there's an EDI opportunity here. The coaches that we're hiring are coaches that can afford to pay for all these courses. And I'd like to go further into other communities where we can grab people from lower socioeconomic areas that might want to coach but just can't because they can't afford to get into these courses. So that's a funding piece I'm looking at.
Yeah, and in the funding aspect, when it comes to doing that is in Ontario, we're fortunate because we do have Quest for Gold, and they do receive about 70-75% of the fees back. But when doing that, it's the initial output that I think coaches struggle with, and especially now because after last year, clubs' budgets are pretty decimated. I know with our organization, I'm fortunate that I can tap into some university students that have come from other programs that have already had their 101 training, which I'm fortunate for. I try and get some of my senior swimmers to volunteer some time to, if they need their volunteer hours still, how are they going to get them? Come in and work with some of the younger kids and mentor through behind some of the other coaches. But the whole budget process within an organization is terrible because our pool fees have pretty much doubled because of restriction of numbers. And yet, so it's going to be the second year in a row where we look at running a deficit. So how many clubs have the backup budget to run that deficit for a second year, and how many grassroots coaches can you afford to bring in, right? So it's about being creative, and if there are coaches on the call who want to put something in the chat box as to how they're managing bringing in coaches to coach, because the grassroots is massive. That's where we need the most number of coaches employed and on the deck, and you just can't you can't do it all the time. So how do you manage bringing in more coaches when you can't necessarily afford to pay more coaches, right? I think that's part of the struggle of some clubs out there, and I know it is for ours.
Yeah.
So I
sorry, I was just going to jump in and say I went around.
So go ahead, Heather. Sorry. Yeah.
I went around on the weekend to the 15 and over summers. You have your NLS. If you're an NLS, you want to coach. I can make that happen. So yes, I'd also just say with the challenge. Sorry, Stu, to jump in, but with the challenge in inspiring these coaches, it's different after the pandemic. I'm finding people value their time more, and where before the pandemic, I would have had grassroots coaches wanting hours and hours of coaching. They wanted to make the money. This year, I'm having a coach want to work 1 hour, just to have something on the resume, or maybe 2 hours. It's different. It's a different vibe since the pandemic has happened. So that's something that I'm dealing with as well, and I don't know how to get past that.
If anybody has a suggestion for Heather, please.
That would be great.
But I think it is one of those things that we are all, or you as club active club members on deck every day. These are the challenges that we're facing as organizations, right? And the idea of it's not just down to lack of pool time or COVID restrictions, things like that. It is about those valuable pieces like coaching, right? And the ability to train your coaches. So I think that it's an interesting thing to highlight in terms of, one of the key pieces that we thought of when we started this grassroots program was the idea that, we know that clubs are dealing with similar situations and similar obstacles with maybe some different nuance, right? But the ability to share and talk about it and is, I think, important, and I think that there's just listening to the two of you talk, I think it's one of those things that you're very much saying the same thing, but with just a different nuance to it that makes you think a little differently around how you're engaging these things. So we're about an hour into this, ladies, and I think it was my plan was to jump to the obstacles facing programs, and we've sort of highlighted that, but I'm wondering if maybe we can circle back around, right, a little bit to the idea of working with that Gen Z coach, and the idea that if we can get them onto a career path, we may be able to feed the system, if you will, for ongoing generations. Because I think there's a lot of, what we see in Ontario, we have a lot of coaches who've been in positions for a long time and who are still out there fighting the battle, and it's great, and they're still working hard, but they have a lot of knowledge to impart on a lot of these young coaches. And I just want to come back to that a little bit, Coach Ken Fitzpatrick did mention it in his in the chat that coach education is as important as pool time, to a program. And I would extend that to say that it's mentorship as well, right? There's a value to feeling a connection across, and I think it's there's a unknown attendee that's put a comment in the chat. It says, don't undermine relationships between staff, but I think it's too, that's, don't underestimate the value of those relationships between that a 16-year-old is coaching one time a week for a thing on the resume is as integral to a program as a head age group coach, just with a different, obviously, responsibilities. So I want to just go back to that and maybe give me a perspective on mentorship that you'd like to see kind of going forward for your programs, to maybe help broaden and capture that next generation of coaches.
When I did the SMART goals with my older, more, and I don't mean older, the coaches that have been with NIAC for about 10 years, they want to mentor. I really learned that through that process. And so I'm hoping in the next year I give them that opportunity, because sometimes after a while, the younger ones don't want to listen to me or Eddie. It's nice, or they're listening to me, but I'm delivering the same sort of message. Whereas I want to utilize the staff I have. They bring different ideas to the table. They approach things differently than maybe I would. I have one coach that called me the bird. He's so energetic and focused. And he brings a different kind of spirit to coaching that the younger coaches are really drawn to. Like a head coach, I get wrapped up in the more admin work as well. So I want to utilize the coaches I have to inspire the newer, younger coach to swimming for sure. I'll think a bit more. Cathy, you can jump in.
So I'm thinking of because there are times when I will show up on deck unannounced, and I like that because it's kind of like a check-in for me, but it also then allows my coaches to say, "Oh, is Cathy going to show up today? I don't know," because as much as I want them to be fully free and going with their program and so on, there still needs to be checks and balances and to show up and just walk with the coach and let them deliver the message. But when the kids are actually swimming, it's walking the deck with that coach and saying, "Oh, what do you notice about that swimmer? Are they doing the skill that you were trying to get across? Is there maybe this another way or this way that we can actually get them to achieve what it is you're trying to teach them?" So it's about giving them that little bit of a challenge to think outside the box of what they're currently teaching, because we all know I can teach somebody something, the swimmer doesn't really get it or do what I'm saying. I can have any number of coaches come up and say pretty much what I'm saying, but in a different format, and they go, "Oh, yeah, no problem," and then they do it, right? So I don't like to step on my coach's toes to the athlete with saying, correcting an athlete or athlete or directing an athlete. I like to have that conversation with the coach while the swimmers are in the water, so that then that coach can deliver the message a little bit differently as to, what I've helped them with. And it makes them gain even more respect from their athlete of teaching. So, we can all step in and give our 2 cents worth, but is that building our grassroots coach up in learning and moving forward in their own knowledge and so on? I think we need to kind of approach it and then step back and let them be the deliverer of the message. So, and while we were thinking about that, Stuart, I was thinking about how to bring in coaches to further their coaching as a viable career. So if we have young, say, high school athletes that are teaching, or even my university students who are teaching, or even if it's a parent that's come in to get involved in coaching and teaching, what courses could they take, maybe outside of coaching courses, that will enhance them for salability and improvement on certain components of teaching? So a high school student, do they know what they want to go to university for? Maybe they want to pursue coaching, but maybe they can get a psych degree. Wow, those two go together so beautifully and can enhance you in your coaching realm of your career, right? Is there something like taking kin, right? Kinesiology. Can that help and assist you with your coaching career moving forward? Absolutely. So it's changing the mindset of our grassroots coaches of thinking more towards coaching as a career rather than a temporary stage of life. Something to just give me some side cash, something to offer volunteer assistance. How can we get our grassroots coaches thinking towards creating a profession out of it and educating themselves to move themselves forward and through the ranks of coaching? If you want to be the absolute, I've had a coach that says, I want to be the top 10 and under coach in Canada. How do I, where do I? And it's great. It's great thinking. Yes, let's work on that pathway and the career and how you're going to get there, right? You want to be an age group coach of, say, that 12 to 15-year-old? Great. Let's figure out how to make you the best that you want to be. In Swimming 101, Laura often, and Laura Nichols, who I usually teach with, she often says to them, be the best coach out of every coach on the deck. Make that parent, and right now we don't have parents in galleries, but kids will go home and deliver the message of how much they enjoyed practice and what they learned. Make you to be that person that everybody says, I want them as a coach. That's who I want to coach me, right? So if everybody has that mindset on the deck to be the absolute best coach and out-coach everybody else, can you imagine the massive success rate that we would have moving forward and even at the Olympic stage? Like, if everybody wanted to out-coach, whatever level you're coaching at, you want to out-coach the coach beside you, yeah, bring it on. Fantastic. How incredible would that be?
I think it would be incredible. I really do. I think so. I think Swim Ontario would be on board with that. 100%.
I was just going to jump in to say,
yeah, go ahead.
On top of being the best coach, be yourself. We've talked about that in the past. Don't try and be the coach that you had. Be yourself and bring, like, I when I started with the Waves, I wanted it to be like a Starbucks or a McDonald's or an Apple store where it was the same everywhere. It was the same curriculum, but bring your own personality to the program. And it's hard. It's a hard mold to break because you've been trained by a lot of the swimmers have been trained by the same coach for many years, and they think they have to be that coach. So the Grassroots, I try and tell them, be yourself. It's okay.
No, I think that's we really are in an age of individuals, right? And allow that individual to really place an imprint on an athlete, on a program, I think is important as well, right? I agree with you.
I think that captures the Gen Z too. Sorry, the Gen Z. They're not Gen Z. They are.
Yeah.
I'm Gen X. Generations early. So I try and keep an open mind. Like that one coach that wants the 1 hour, that's okay. Like that, I'm so happy to have that coach for the hour. I'm honored that they wanted to come and work for me, and I'm going to do everything I can to get them further. Maybe we'll capture their imagination and they'll want to keep coaching. Mm-hmm. It's okay. Gen Z, they do they're multitaskers. They have a pile of screens in front of them. They're okay with having a few jobs. So if coaching is one and they have another job, fine, that's great. I'll keep an open mind to it because I'm not Gen Z.
They're jugglers. My wife is one of those. She has lots of jobs and she loves it, right? For her, it keeps her attention and sort of engaging in a different way through the work world, right? So,
Right.
yeah. Okay, so I have one more question for you, but I'm going to pose a question out to the chat or to the audience here, and Heather had referenced I guess a mantra of purpose, belonging, and value or worth, I think it was. And I wonder if coaches wanted to take a minute and just think about a word or 3 words or 2 words that they would apply to their staffs or their thinking in terms of coach development and grassroots swimming, and maybe just throw it in the chat. I know we've got about 50 coaches on the call right now, so if we could get 1 or 2, that'd be great. I feel like that's a rush of comments. And then if you do have any questions for Cathy or Heather, then feel free to throw them in the chat as well. But I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal balls, ladies, and just maybe look at what 18 to 36 months down the road looks like in terms of grassroots swimming. What are we hoping that the work that we're putting in now to those athletes, to those coaches, is going to bring for your programs? And gold star to Coach Ken Fitzpatrick for the first 2 words: teamwork and accountability. Well done, sir. Come on, don't be shy. Throw them up there. Heather, how about I throw to you?
Crystal ball looking forward. If I look at now, the demand is there. We just don't have enough pool space and staff to meet the demand. So I am so hopeful in a couple of years that it's just thriving. That I have all the coaches I need, and that, like, my goal has always been I wanted 500 grassroots swimmers on top of the 600 NIAC swimmers or 400 NIAC swimmers. I've wanted a massive grassroots program, and I think it can be done. I think the need and the demand is there, and I think I'm hoping it's creative. I'm hoping that we are reimagining it and changing things up a bit. I'm always open to learning and trying new things. I love innovation. I love it. I'm so thankful to the board at NIAC because they give me that freedom to explore and to try new things. Always. They've always done that. And I have to say also, I'm so thankful to you, Stu, and to Dean, because you want to talk about grassroots. Like that, no one's ever approached me about it. And that is really my wheelhouse. It's what I really enjoy talking about. And as I said, innovating and trying new things. So I see it, my crystal ball, and my hope that is vibrant and thriving in a couple of years. And we're back to where we were in numbers and maybe more, but also maybe a different approach potentially.
Cathy?
Yeah, and because we've had this reset and this kind of do-over, I look at it, I try to look at things with the gifts that have been given to us, right? Because so many times through adversity and through struggles in life, we can kind of sit in the ditch. And this is not the time to sit in the ditch. This is the time to look at what the gifts have been that we have, that have been given to us, that we can work with, and we can move beyond where we were before. So the things before COVID that frustrated me was not being fine-tuning skill work, not working to advance things, always playing catch up, right? And now it's, we don't have to play catch up anymore. We are now in a position of building and establishing our total foothold on what we want to achieve down the road. So down the road, yes, we want to have better skills. We want to have better performances. We want to have better numbers. And that's happening right now because of what we're doing and how we're taking the process to get there. And if we hadn't had COVID, we would still be on the same path that we were on before, in trying to muddle through it and catch up to where we wanted to be, rather than taking the time and the opportunity to utilize the time we've been given to enhance what we're doing. So, I mean, last year, I'd send my kids up to do something fast off the blocks. They were still swimming best times with far less. So did we utilize the pool time and the teaching the way we should have beforehand? Probably not. Now I look at it and go, wow, we are already on a great track and path forward, and we are going to be so successful down the road. So I look at 2024, right? 3 years from now, less than 3 years from now. How many kids are we going to have at trials? How many kids will we have at provincials? How many kids will we have at regionals? How many kids will we have at festivals? And how many kids at that are not just participants there to get the bag tag or to go home with a t-shirt? How many of those kids will we have who are competitors and who are contenders? That's where we're working on right now at this point. We're working in for today to have success down the road, and we're working hard for today so that we will achieve that down the road. What the numbers dictate doesn't matter. However many we have in our program right now, doesn't matter. If we set up pure quality of teaching and making sure that our foundation is strong and that we are mentoring our grassroots coaches to want to move forward in their careers, 3 years from now, the 17-year-old you have on the deck that's coaching, are they still in coaching down the road, contributing back with furthering their knowledge of what they have in the next 3 years, right? Everything has to be about where we're going to be down the road, but it happens with what we do right now. And we don't have the time to waste to go back in history to pick up where we left off. We can only build on what we are now and how to make it better from this point forward.
It's pretty great.
I'm running for office.
There you go. There you go. Well, I'm going to take a pause and just ask if there are any other questions that have come through, that are coming through the chat. We've had a couple of statements, but I think I want to end off with a statement from Gord Sprung, who says, I think a lot of what I've been hearing throughout the course of the conference so far has been about the relationships we develop with our membership, and I think that includes our coaches. I think being relatable and developing relationships is the most important part of building your team, especially as we come out of the pandemic. And I think that's I think that's a great statement, Gord. I think that encapsulates a lot of what some of the takeaways we're hoping that we get from this conference. I want to thank both of you for your time. I don't know if you've got a last word, Heather or Cathy or Heather, doesn't matter what order, before we sign off.
I'd say step outside your comfort zone, eliminate your fear to speak up, eliminate your fear to go and, join another coach on deck to be mentored, because the fear creates negativity and fear will stop you in your tracks. Stepping outside that comfort zone and outside the box and keep learning and asking the questions, and even visiting a coach from another program if you want, you can set that up, and it can work. Just move, do it. Don't stand still. Standing still will take you nowhere.
I would agree with everything you just said, Cathy. Educate. I took advantage of all that time off and hit as many webinars as I could, learn from you all out there. And I encourage that for the Grassroots coach too. If you can take one thing away from a podcast, a webinar, you've gotten something out of it, as far as I'm concerned. And I would agree, is ask questions, connect. I'm happy to connect with anybody who wants to reach out. Connection is important. I mentored during the pandemic a speed skating coach. You don't have to know about speed skating to know about coaching. And she learned a lot from me, and I learned a lot from her. It's the skills that are involved in coaching. So connect with others in other sports. Connection is so, so important.
And you know what, if you're here and you've been on the conference all weekend, you've already taken your step forward, and relate your coaching as a grassroots coach as being on the deck with your athletes. Can you only coach by standing in the corner of the pool deck without moving forward on the deck to watch your athletes grow and develop and succeed? Is your coaching, are you standing in the corner with your coaching, or are you actually walking the deck?
Those are great final thoughts. I'm going to steal something from Janet that she did at the end of her presentation, the Women in Coaching panel, which was great, by the way, Cathy. So favorite book, podcast?
Jeez.
Come on, you can do it. Favorite thing to share with the coaches? Got anything?
I listen to all of Greg Well's podcasts. I love them. I get something out of them all the time. And I share them with the coaches. And there's somebody else, Cathy, you might have to speak while I think about him. I think it's Seth Bernard. I think he's on YouTube, and he does little 7-minute snippets of how to speak confidently, how to, I don't know, it feeds into the art of coaching. I really, really like him. I'll look it up, and I can tell people later if they want to know. But I do think Greg Well's podcast.
Gosh, I'm kind of going, I don't know if I can give the book I gave yesterday. But, you know, there's one person that I met a couple of years ago when I was placed on the select coaches group of women through SNC. And we've been learning all kinds of things on how to develop your career path. And if you want to follow somebody who gives great tidbits of information and advice on how to just advance yourself professionally, and I don't know if I can say this here, maybe I should put it in the chat box, but her handle is This Chick's a Bitch. So but she talks about how to advance yourself professionally in a way that doesn't make you always behind the curtain, and how to actually stand up and talk about your achievements, and not deliver your achievements based on, well, we as a team did this. No, what did you do specifically in that achievement world to get you to where you are? So it's about being confident and standing tall and being strong and advancing yourself for you, and all others around you will also advance with you.
That's great. Mine is, I have a book that I circle back to regularly. My wife just shakes her head when she sees me flipping through it again. But it's by James Kerr. It's called Legacy. And it's what the All Blacks can teach us about the business of life. It's centered around the New Zealand All Blacks program. You know, it's an adult read, I'm not going to lie. But I always find a little nugget in there that's an interesting takeaway. So with that, I'll say thank you once again. Thank you to our attendees. A reminder that we Lindsay has put in the chat around the missed attendance check for PD points. There's the JOT form for you to submit. And a couple of programming reminders. I'll be back on at 1 p.m. because if you haven't had enough of me already, I'll be introducing Judy Reedy for her second session around building trust. And then we have our inclusion roundtable this evening at 7, I believe. So feel free to jump on either of those sessions. I highly recommend both. Thank you again, Heather. Thank you, Cathy. And thank you all for joining us today. I appreciate your time. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. And know that you're welcome to get in touch with me at any time.
Me too.